Is GloFAS very quickly. It takes outputs from numerical weather prediction systems and with hydrological models to produce global flood forecasts. And really the idea is to be complementary to informations to national that are available from national and hydrometeorological services. So it's really something very important, this complementarity, which is at the heart of CHEMS. And as a Copernicus service, it's freely available to anybody across the world. I think that makes it quite unique and quite special. Because it's a global system and because the way the model works at the moment, it's really designed for larger catchments and really designed to look at riverine flooding, so not floods from coastal or surge or flash flood, but still it provides quite a lot of that information. So what does GloFAS give us? I mentioned it is a forecasting service, so it provides hydrological ensemble forecast that updated daily. Those forecasts are transformed into maps, but also delivered as data sets. And those are accessible through dedicated web services and data services. And for those who stay later on, that will be presented in our demonstration session. In the map viewers and the maps, we highlight, we pick up out from the hydrological ensemble forecast those regions where there is a flood signal, which is expected within the next 30 days. We also have an outlook, a seasonal outlook product that highlights areas which are expected to be wetter or drier in the next 16 weeks. And for those products, if you click on an area of interest that shows a signal, you've got also some additional information. But a lot of that will be explained during the demonstration, the phase 2 of this webinar, if you want to stay and you want to learn more. So why are we here today? We're, of course, to explain what GloFAS is, but really to present this version 3.1, which is a huge cycle change because we've completely changed the way the hydrological simulations are done. So how GloFAS works. As I said, we've got numerical weather prediction systems which provide forecasts at medium range and then seasonal outlook, which are then combined with the rainfall runoff component, which are then transformed into how much water you've got in rivers. Those simulations are then analyzed to highlight what are the anomalies and whether we've got a flood signal. Next slide. So up to now, the part that was doing the rainfall runoff calculation was actually part of the ECMWF numerical weather prediction system. What's happening with version 3.1 is actually we're now using a fully calibrated hydrological model, which is the least flood model developed by the JRC. We take the input from the rainfall forecast and temperature forecast and evaporation forecast as input to that model, and that model does all the hydrological calculations. And those calculations are also used to calculate the threshold to identify the flood signal. So I'm not going to go into details, but basically this is a slide summarizing this part of this rainfall runoff transformation. And what's happened in doing that is that we can calibrate all the parameters of this hydrological component together in order to to drive GloFAS. So we're now going to present you a little bit as a kind of overview of how that changed the system. So the first thing to remember, because we changed the way the hydrological process are calculated, that has some implication on the river discharge amount and regime. And this slides to highlight that the threshold which are used to identify the flux signal have changed between the previous threshold and the 3.1. This means that if you are using GloFAS with a fixed threshold that you've decided was important for your decision making, then you need to review whether that's still appropriate or whether you need to change that threshold when migrating to 3.1. If you use the flood signal as identified with GloFAS, then you don't need to do anything, because what we've done is that we also updated the threshold used to identify this flood signal, so it's consistent with the new version. So, how does that work in terms of hydrological modeling? I'm not going to go in a lot of details. A lot of information is on the wiki pages, and I'm going to mention those next. But one metrics very often used to evaluate hydrological modeling performance is the Klint-Gupta efficiency measure, and we use here the modified version. And this map shows you the distribution for areas where we had observations of that scores. And the darker the symbol, the better the hydrological modeling performance. And you can see that overwhelming, we've got a very good, moderate to very good performance with 3.1. There are some regions where the performance is a little bit lower, but this is associated with any global modeling. So the KG provides a very global overview. We wanted to also share with you information about biases, for example. So here, this slide, if we've got little biases, it will be in light colors, and then the darkest the color, the highest the bias. You can see that GloFAS 3.1 does have a positive bias. What I want to remind you is that when we use the threshold based on GloFAS simulation, that will compensate for the bias. But if you use your own threshold based on observation, you need to be aware of that bias. Something extremely important when you want to simulate the variability of hydrological regime and river discharge is the correlation. And here, again, you've got darker colors showing higher correlation the simulation compared to observations. And you can see that overwhelmingly, we've got a good correlation. So it shows that 3.1 really simulates well the various variability of the river regime across the world. Of course, there are some areas where the correlation is a little bit lower. So finally, I wanted just to give you a slight summary of kind of little comparison between GloFAS 3.1 and GloFAS 2.1. And here we're focusing on catchments which have not been used for the calibration, to have like a feel of how the model behaves in general outside those very particular calibration region. And the blue colors show when GloFAS 3.1 is better than 2.1, and the red colors is when 2.1 is better. What you can see is that we've got a mixed signal, and in general, perhaps the southern hemisphere behaves a little bit less well, but we need to do much more analysis to compare. This is a very rough analysis based on the KGE. But we thought that that was important to share with you that information. And again, more detailed are posted on the wiki. So not the modeling, hydrological modeling change was very important for GloFAS 3.1, but we didn't only do that. So we've introduced, we improve our data and web services. So we've introduced new layers. So those are those maps which are available from the GloFAS website in providing detailed information on this hydrological model performance. We also added a seasonal forecast skill layer. So since last autumn, you had an overview of the GloFAS forecast performance, and now we've added that as the seasonal forecast skill. And we've also upgraded the rapid risk assessment, and more information about those layers will be mentioned and shown during the demonstration. We've also introduced something we thought was very, very important for users, is a way of accessing the new upgrade before the launch. So actually that was in kind of the last month. So since the 15th of April, GloFAS 3.1 products have been available through a stage web interface. And what's important is the GloFAS 2.1 products, which now is not operational anymore, we carry on being run as a legacy cycle. And that we thought was very important to help you who are using GloFAS to migrate and do all the tests and have time to do the migration to the new system. And those the stage interface is available to registered users only, but anybody can register to GloFAS. And those dual products are not only available as maps, but also as time series that you can download through the CDS. We've also continued our documentation through the wiki space. Please, I really invite you to have a look at that. It's got all sorts of things which are for more detailed information about the models, the results, the data services. And as I said, we'll have this demonstration session at the end. So stay online if you want to hear more about those layers.